Hey everybody, do you own rental property in the state of Oregon? Well, I do, and I want to talk about what just got passed by the Senate and the legislature in the state of Oregon on July 6, 2023, which is Senate Bill 611, and how this law is going to affect potential housing providers moving forward when it comes to the limitations of rent increases, when it comes to the limitations of no-cause evictions, and what it really means over the long-term valuation of what I am forecasting as a rental property owner in the state of Oregon. Now, I want you to stay all the way to the end. I'm going to talk about potential exit strategies, but before we do that, please like, subscribe, please comment below with a healthy debate, whether you're a tenant, landlord, or anybody out there that wants to talk about this topic, because I think it's big and there's not been a lot of coverage on it and it's just being released. But before we move forward, please contact your landlord tenant attorney or contact your licensed property manager before you make any drastic decisions. If you're going to sell, please reach out to me. I sell millions of dollars of investment property in the state of Oregon, and I'd be happy to run an APOD, an annual property operating data evaluation or comparative market analysis on your property so that we can look at its long-term value versus where your current rents are. All right, let's dig into it. On July 6, 2023, Governor Kotek signed Bill SB 611. If you guys are familiar, SB 608, that just came in a couple years back during the COVID era. Last year's rent increase was capped at 14.6. Now this new law is basically saying unless an exemption applies, rent increases may not exceed the lesser of either 10% or 7% plus the published consumer pricing index, CPI. But basically 7% plus CPI or 10%, whichever is lesser. If a housing provider terminates a tenancy without cause in the first year of occupancy, the new tenant can't have a reset of rents. And what that really means is whatever the current rent was plus the 10% rent cap, for example, that's what the new tenant will be essentially charged when they move in. And what this really does is change the valuation of value add projects, what we mean purchasing a property, serving an eviction to remodel and update the property to where it needs to be, and then not being able to reset those rents to the market. Now, what also does is it caps housing providers can only raise rent once in any 12-month period. That was pretty much common with SB 608 and the last couple of years anyways. But what it doesn't do is it subsequently doesn't limit the exemptions that were already in place, which was the 15-year certificate of occupancy. So if somebody had built a high-rise multifamily or a specific property in the last 15 years, they're not subject to these rent increases, caps. So what this really means is that this law is punishing mom and pop landlords that own 1 to 4 units typically, or don't have the money to build new construction, or don't have the money to develop high-rise multifamily, big, large multi-unit class A and B assets. And so real estate investment trusts, REITs, syndication funds, hedge funds, housing investors with deep, deep pockets don't have to follow these laws, right? So I want to really talk about the pros and the cons of SB 611 from not from a real estate broker's perspective, but from a rental property owner's perspective. I own millions of dollars in property. I built my portfolio from nothing. And what this really means is that each and every time I view a property to potentially acquire, if a property has super, super under market rents, I'm going to have to now do an equation of telling myself, if I had only the opportunity of increasing rents 10% each and every year, if I bought this property, how long would it take me to get to the market rent? And if that number is over 5 years, and most value add or any type of repositioning of property, I'm going to have to get a deep discount on that property to even consider it. That's a lot of property management. That's a lot of potential repair calls. That's a lot of tenant interaction with the same tenant for 5 years just to get 10%, 10%, 10%, 10%. Well, what happens if inflation doesn't keep in alignment with that? What happens if vendors get way more expensive over time? What happens if property values dip or tank, right? SB 611 is punishing the mom and pop landlord that potentially is now going to have a lower valuation on their property if they have under market rents. Now, for somebody who's been keeping up with market rents, for somebody who's just serving, a 5% rent increase every year, maybe this doesn't apply. But as soon as you start over-regulating mom and pop landlords, as soon as you take supply and demand for rentals and you shake up into a blender, we don't know what the result is going to be. But I want to give you my predictions. So, regardless of SB 611, every property I've ever acquired that has had under market rents, I've done that exact equation I just discussed. How long is it going to take me to get to market rent, and how long is it going to take me to get to my income, my net operating income goal? And then what I do is I essentially craft my offer to be in alignment to the current income approach of that property, whether I'm financing it or paying cash. So any mom and pop landlord with lower than market rents, deferred maintenance, is most likely going to look at this and say, this is just a lose-lose battle. I don't have the money to put into repairs to get the property and have the great curb appeal, but I also don't have the time to do 10% rent increases to get us all the way back to market rents. So I'm going to sell it. And what happens, and when that asset class is not is not a single family home in most cases, is that property goes on the market and is bought by an end user owner occupier. Those tenants are evicted for buyer owner occupancy, and now that rental property is pulled from the market. Yes, I will argue anybody in the state of Oregon, whether each side you're on. As a real estate broker, I see it each and every month. I get calls from tenants all the time that's saying my landlord is evicting me. And I ask them, what do you live in, a duplex or a single family home? 9 times out of 10, it's a single family home that was a rental, a non-owner occupied single family home. So this law potentially is going to lead to more single family homes that were rentals, leading to more evictions and less inventory and supply of rental properties on the market. Now, the plus side of that is that it's going to increase the valuation of single family homes, right? As more and more owner occupiers buy these properties and less single family homes are being rented, that's going to lead to macroeconomic changes in the market. Now, another pro of this whole entire process is that if there's less and less inventory of available rental properties to purchase, the price of rental properties is going to go up. Now, people may argue me on that point, but I feel that, like with duplexes, especially in Lane County, I look every day. There's only 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 duplexes that hit the market every couple weeks. If a 4-unit hits the market, oh my God, it's like a feeding frenzy. But what happens when these properties start being unloaded from portfolios? We don't want to invest in Oregon anymore, right? What if that is what the seller's mentality is? And these 4 units, these 3 units, these duplexes, these single family homes, there's going to be a spike in inventory that's going to hit the market. And the more restriction you put on landlords, the more long-term the investor has to be. So you're going to get a demographic shift of who is purchasing these rental properties. It's going to be people who can weather the storm, people who can park money, more liquid investors with cash, especially at 7% interest rates, right? If a DSCR loan doesn't make sense, or a 1 to 4 unit Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac conventional investment loan doesn't make sense at current interest rates, who's going to be purchasing these properties? Cash investors, out-of-state investors, people who want to hold these, hoard them, put them in their portfolio, aka the mom and pop, once again, doesn't have a chance. Now, let's talk about cons of this law. It's going to change, I feel, that more property managers are going to feel pressured by their fiduciary responsibilities to their owners that are working with them to increase rents max every single year from moving forward. I saw it with SB 608. I saw it every time somebody would acquire a property. I'm seeing it right now. My own mentality in all of it is I have to look at that trajectory of market rent and staying in alignment, but also what are my vendors' costs? What are my insurance costs? What are my taxes raising each year? And at the end of the day, putting this all in a big blender, what this is really going to mean is that most landlords, most property managers are going to suggest that we keep raising rents until demand for rentals slows down. And last call that I was on, or podcast I was listening to, said, I think Lane County was like 30,000 units in a deficiency. Guys, this law may increase that deficiency. Rental properties may not become rental properties any longer. Duplexes may be purchased by more owner occupiers, because the more restrictions you put on the mom and pop landlord, the more they want to invest in places like Nashville, Alabama, Ohio, whatever, right? They may move all of those money out of the state, perform a 1031 exchange or not perform a 1031 exchange. But I really want to talk about potential exit strategies in all of this. Now, if you own a property free and clear, you could potentially owner finance that to one of your tenants. You could potentially list it with me or somebody that is your trusted investment advisor, and list it with owner financing terms only, which that means you're going to remove yourself of being a landlord or housing provider and now be the financier of an investment property to another buyer. This essentially could be a long-term value add play for yourself, because now you're earning earned interest income. You got a down payment to cover yourself in terms of hedging risks like foreclosure, and you put yourself in a position with the right advisory of a CPA in capital gains deferment, or capital gains, what I would call dicing it at some level of principal paydown. Now, contact your CPA, but one of the potential exit strategies for any investor in the state of Oregon is owner financing their properties. I'm seeing it right now. I just saw it with a 4-unit this week. Also, another exit strategy is performing a 1031 and moving those assets outside of the state of Oregon. I've done that as well. One of my best friends that's also an investor had done it, and I think he moved his money to Nashville, Tennessee. Another possible exit strategy is moving that rental to a short-term rental like an Airbnb, VRBO, or a midterm rental for traveling nurses or potential people who come here for relocation, temporary jobs, executive housing, whatever it is, right? Different formats and structures of that lease, not the typical buy and hold tenant that you would inherit on an acquisition of a rental property, and being able to shift how you rent that property. So there are potential exit strategies. More than happy to run some numbers on you if your investment property, you're not 100% sure what it's worth. I can give you a CMA. I can also run an APOD, annual property operating data report. I can also work with you in figuring out what the best strategy is based upon your low performers versus your high performers in your portfolio. But I will say this, Senate Bill 611 has some pros, right? It's trying to protect the pricing of rental properties. The problem is they're not issuing enough building permits. They're not changing the urban growth boundary. They're not giving tax incentives or waiving permit costs for new construction multifamily. We've seen it a little bit with the middle housing laws that have come into place in terms of allowing and being more flexible with ADUs. But at the end of the day, if you can't build and you only can build up, who are those investors paying for those projects? Not the mom and pop landlord. So if you have any questions about any of this, like I said, please reach out to your licensed property manager. I have a great one in town that I can refer you to. If you want to talk about potential strategy and what, get my opinion on what you should do, reach out to me, 458-209-0163. My name is Dan Gandee. I own the Operative Group. I have over 20 agents